Hello all. We're endeavoring to go live now. Maybe we've managed to do it, so that's good. I want to share this post with folks. We'll do some practice. For whoever may wish to. Yeah, I'm just gonna share the post here in a place or two, and that's about all I have to. That's good. All right, we'll get ourselves started. Not sure who might come on, but I'm ready for some practice. This is our True Beginners series, which, as you perhaps know by now, is working on the basics. And who needs to work on the basics? A true beginner. And I say true beginner because that includes I guess every worthy advanced student or teacher or grandmaster or whatever. The experts included. So one of the ideas with this, I just got to stand where you can see my feet. One of the ideas in this series is to work on these elements of our internal practices in a way that's inviting people who are infirm, elderly, less flexible, recovering from injury, currently sick, recovering from surgery, that sort of thing. And so rather than saying, welcome to stance training with me, here's our day one practice, I'll be saying something like, welcome to day 30 practice with me, here's our practice, right? And the idea is to invite everybody in and make it simple and reasonable, and we can find our own difficulty, whether our body provides it, our mind provides it, or the degree of stance provides it, or duration of practice. So once again, I'm standing with my feet parallel. So for me, that means I'm facing south, facing the camera, and my weight's evenly distributed on the 2 feet. I'm going to just let my knees bend a little bit, and in bending them, I want to make sure that my knees bend and find their way in the direction of the toes. So if my toes are going here and I bend my knees, I don't want to feel like my knees pitch in or each to the right side or pitch out, which could happen, I suppose. And the idea is to let my femurs describe a direction that's also described by my feet. So the line between the heel and the toes, or the front of the foot and the back of the foot, is in my case south, and so that's the direction described by the hip to the knee, that line. So here I am, bent. I want to make sure that as I bent, I kind of have this sitting into the posture idea here, that my bend hasn't tipped me forward. And I don't want to simply just say, well, I can see the horizon, because I might very well be tipped forward, but also extending my neck to see the horizon and think, well, I must be upright. I want to actually learn to develop a sense of where my hips are, the angle that my hips describe between the upper leg and the hip or pelvis area. It can help to consider if your shoulders are atop your hips and your hips are atop your feet, then I've built a pretty nice balance. It can help to lift the head by an imaginary string. It can help to sight the horizon with ease. And somebody that might be watching or joining in, hopefully not just watching, might say, well, that's not how you do a horse stance. We always trained this, depth or duration. Well, not everybody's going to join that class. That's scary. That's painful. That's worrisome. That's anxiety producing. And all I'm doing here, I've just sunk down, I don't know, 2 inches. Not at all as far a horse stance as I might normally practice, but this is just me sunk a little bit, activating the right tissues, checking in with the recipe, checking in with the principles that I'm coming to know through this true beginner's practice. For me, usually if I'm doing a stance, I'm also doing other stuff. Here's what I'm working on, here's the position I'm holding, here's the, but that can be distracting from the stance, and it can complexify what we're doing here, and also turn some people off. Like, well, I can't do that whole complicated thing that they were doing in their practice. That's not for me. So I'm trying to consciously put my hands in my pockets, cross my arms, not give them my usual kind of kung fu stuff to do. So I've just been chatting here for a minute and a half, and I've just remained where I put my feet, where I put my knees, where I put my pelvis. That could constitute the whole practice for you. So we're gonna try another little couple warm-ups here, and we'll get into a new stance today. My plan has been to check in on my phone at the current live stream, sitting in the saddle, riding the horse, being a good jockey. Yeah, I'm the perfect body size for a jockey, so perfect. If you need to come out of it, take a break, take a break. Good, but I encourage you not to try and do more than I'm doing. Actually come into this beginner's place, come to know that beginner's mindset, however experienced you are, however flexible you are. Much easier to get to know the principles when we don't have high stakes, and when we don't have a great degree of trial going on. Depth, duration, repetition, anaerobic or rapidity or rhythm. None of the other complexities that we can add. I'm just barely doing this, but I'm doing it, and there's nothing much working against my doing it well. When we do a very deep stance, very fast change stances, certainly add all these other kind of martial artsy things, there's a whole bunch of stuff that invites my stance to degrade or underperform or fail me, right? And here, there's not much going on besides this. I just sat in an inch or two, and that's it. I keep checking in on my posture, checking in on the track of the knees. In addition, if you'd like, you can kind of melt the shoulders, breathe nicely in through the nose, see if you can find that breath a little bit on the deep side. Exhale through the mouth, have a smiley thought. You can relax the buttocks and feel the tailbone sink. I'm constantly checking in, and is the weight in my feet even? Have I drifted to the outer edge? Have I drifted to two inner edges? Have I drifted to the toes or the balls of the feet? Have I drifted to the heels? And I'd like to feel like I'm in the center so that all of my foot gets to participate in holding me up. So I'm going to just see if there's any questions. Usually there isn't, but if you have a question, please check in. Much love, Conrad. Thank you. Dr. Bowie's on again. Fantastic. And Patricia's here again. Hooray. And hi, Jared. Hello. Yay. That looks like you might have been first in. Fantastic. So we got Colorado, Ohio, and New Jersey. I think Patricia, maybe New Jersey. And Hawaii, so we have people from all over joining in. So I'm going to transition into a little bit of a stretch, a little bit of a drill. So feet together. Again, here I am facing south. And what I want to do is just kind of drive my knees forward, but not too far forward. I don't want them to go beyond the balls of the feet. So I'm going to drive my knees forward. And I'll just undo that so I can just practice doing it a few times. Good. We're going to work on a mythical animal stance today, or at least that's my plan. As I've said over and over on these Facebook Lives, I don't have any microphone setup figured out. Nothing seems to work, at least with iOS, with Facebook Live. I'm trying to raise my voice a little bit. I'm about 15 feet from the iPad. It's the most up-to-date iPad. Just a little bit of a breeze here and there. It's not very windy for sure. Not an awful lot of noise on the farm, although somebody's chainsawing somewhere. And this is the sound you get. Recently I've been just post-editing these and trying to bump the sound up the little bit that I'm able. See if that helps. Normally I teach with Zoom, or I record on Filmic Pro, and I have microphones that work for that and get really nice sound, even noise cancellation. Facebook Live, I have no answer, no resolution, no idea. If you do, please let me know. I'll spend the money to buy the equipment and try and improve this situation for everybody. I've been archiving these free on Patreon, so you can follow. I created I don't know if a playlist is the right term there, but I tagged them, so they're all called a True Beginner or a True Beginner's Guide. I forget now, but something True Beginner. So I'm sure if you search True on my Patreon page, you'll see, I don't know, we did 4 or 5 of these already. My plan so far is to do one every day. When we run out of stances, maybe we'll combine them, maybe we'll do shifting, maybe we'll do stepping, maybe we'll do hand stuff, maybe we'll do tuina, maybe we'll do stretches, but that's all dependent on you guys. Do I sense that there's an interest? If not, I'll be moving on to other things. Trying to offer something as a creative outlet that I can reach people and help. So let's come up. I think I probably left you there for a long time. Sorry. So we're up, so the knees are straight but not locked. We're gonna go down again, and I wanna think about the knees coming forward and the thighs coming together. So probably you don't see any light between my groin and my heels, right? There's not something like this. So I feel that my knees have come together, my thighs have come together, and my thighs have just come together enough to, hold my hat there. As I'm practicing, if the hat drops, I've kind of lost that focus. This is a shout out to David Shaver and Peaceful Wolf Tai Chi Chuan. Got his hat on today. It is pretty cold though. It's probably 35 or something and overcast, so it's a little colder out here today. So I sink and I feel my thighs together, knees together, feet remain together. And in sinking here, we'll come up again, take a break. I want to make sure that as I sink, I don't just fold at the waist and bring my shoulders forward of my hips. Here they're just barely forward, but they are forward, which would also lower my gaze. I want to feel that as I sink, the angle of my hip, right, the pelvis and the spine, if you will, changes. So that as my knees drive forward and the angle of my knee changes, I feel my tailbone finding my heels, which is to say, I remain upright. Come on up. So let's try this with a breath count here so we can coordinate with the breath. Remember, if you are doing something like Qigong or starting to do something along that journey, generally what we want to do is we want to involve the mind, involve the breath, and involve the body, and coordinating the actions of all three. So here, as I sink, exhale, with the breath, with the mind. And then when I'm down here, I'm going to breathe in. And when I am ready to come up, I'll coordinate it with an inhalation. But I might stay here for a little bit and inhale, exhale while I'm here. But when I am ready to come up, I want to coordinate that. So the beginning of my coming up is the beginning of the inhalation. The end of my having stood straight up is the end of my inhalation. Just as I did when I went down. Exhale, the exhale begins as I bend the joints, and the exhale ends as I arrive at my finished position. Inhale up. Let's try it again. Exhale down. Inhale up. So a nice practice with this is to, let's take, let's say 5 seconds to go down. So 5 seconds on that out breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 10 seconds on an inhalation. So staying in this 10-second position. Exhale, maybe 5 seconds, and then inhale 5 seconds to come up. I just picked a few numbers there, but the idea is to kind of lengthen them and coordinate a nice proportion of in-breath to out-breath, movement to return from movement, movement to stillness, from stillness, a returning movement to the start position, and so forth. So we might have said 5 seconds down, then 35 seconds at the bottom, 5 seconds up. We might have said 15 seconds down, 15 seconds at the bottom, 15 seconds to come up. Let's do a little more difficult version of that. We'll do 5 seconds down, 5-second inhale at the bottom, then 5-second a little deeper. If you have it in you, you might not continue movement during that whole 5 second, then 5-second there. If you inhale, exhale, and then when you're ready to coordinate, come up, inhale, maybe 10 seconds on the way up since we did double 5 going down. Good. So one more time. I won't count because different people might be doing different counts. I'm just going to come down. You can come up when you want. I'm looking for questions. Conrad said, do you consider this horsing around? Well, as a Taoist, I would say that there's no more sacred practice than horsing around. But it's conscientious, purposeful, sacred practice of horsing around. So a lot of my work looks like play, but it's work and I take the fun seriously. Hey Josh, hey Steve, good to see you fellows again. Good afternoon, Jared, I see your comment. Good, come on up. One thing to think about here I'll just do it again, we'll have more to say. So sinking down, frequently one of the challenges in stances in general, as people go down, they lose their vertical alignment, their spine. So imagining that the noonday sun is, certainly directly overhead, the shadow cast by my shoulders envelops my feet. If I was to do this, I might just self-assess, like, hey, I got pretty low today, this must be good. Or, I'm still seeing the horizon, I must have gotten really low today, I feel good. But the shadow cast by my shoulder from the noonday sun is going to be, well, we can see what's right below my shoulders is this area in front of my feet, right? So as we do these practices, are my shoulders still over my feet? And that can be a nice way to develop the proprioceptive awareness of where your body is. Certainly these days I find myself suggesting to students, well, you have hundreds of dollars worth of camera in your pocket. Film yourself from the side, from the front, from the rear, 10-second video, and then go look. Oh, I see. I know what I just thought I was doing. Now I'm seeing it the way my classmates would, or the way my teacher would. This can help to develop the idea of teaching in you as well. The ability to see a body and understand what corrections might be made, understand what's going right, understand the difference between what's happening and what the person doing it believes is happening. And, probably doesn't cost you anything. Film it, edit it, you chop off the first 30 seconds while you set it down and walked over and figured out where to practice, and whatever it is you did, and then delete it. No cost, no problem. I find that to be a really good practice. So let's come up. We're going to practice a new stance today. And this is one that really leads in very well for stepping practices, but we haven't gotten that far. I have a sip of water here. Nice. Hi, Miriam. Glad you could join us. Hello and welcome. So this practice, this stance is called the Chilin Stance, and I've purposely left this stable surface here to suggest that you might want to use one at some point. So when I do this this particular practice, I'm going to be visualizing a straight line, and I think I have one here, so maybe I can just use this as a reference. Sorry to step off camera. So hopefully this high visibility snow marker will help to visualize a straight line. I don't know how well you can see that on the camera. But again, I'm facing south, so here's my north-south line. And when I'm doing this particular practice, and I'm using this to encourage you, if you need this for balance, great. What I mean by this is something solid and sturdy. So not a chair that's going to collapse, not a chair on wheels, not a chair that's too far away that invites you to lean in order to receive its support. But it might be a countertop or a big oak desk or something like that. So I'm trying to keep my hand on it to encourage you to use an external support if that's what you need. Well, my practice is going to be to have I guess I'll say for now, my heels on the same line, which is here again, north-south. And I'm going to have them, I'll do it in profile. So I'm going to have those feet, I think I'm staying in, I'm going to have these 2 feet a bit separate, right? I don't want to be too close, right? I want to be separate. If we can think of the body as contained within the triangle described by the 2 feet and the top of the head, there's our 3 points. A very narrow base of a triangle is not going to readily contain the weight of the body. And it certainly isn't going to allow it to descend into the sort of fatter bottom of a triangle. If the feet are very close together, we have a very tall, narrow triangle, and more of the mass, the volume, the area of the body has to be nearer to the top. So a little bit wider is going to be a little bit more stable. So that's my position. We're going to end up being front weighted in this one. And so here's my line. I'm going to start on the rear leg, and I'm going to open the right leg by turning the hip and letting it pivot on the heel. And I'm going to open that, we'll call it 30 degrees or so. So if I picture having turned it 90 degrees, a full turn, so in my case facing west, and I can visualize that 90-degree turn. If I divide that in 3 pieces, that's my 30, 60, 90, right? 30, 60, 90. So if I can look down and visualize this, and then just imagine, well, half of it's what we call 45, half of that, and a third of that, and then another third, and the final third. Third, full, half, that's 45. So that's what I mean by 30, just almost 2/3 of the way to the 45. But that sounds more mathy, I think, than many people will want to hear. So I shift the weight to the rear. And certainly if you don't need the external support, I'm not encouraging you to look for it. I never do. But I don't want to sound like I'm inviting you into trouble that you can't bear. So the weight's on the rear. All the toes are lined up. And I'm going to open from the hip to pivot my lead foot about 30 degrees. And then I'm going to shift forward. Good. So I'm going to redo that a few times. And this is me practicing this part of the recipe. Right? You practice sifting flour, you practice weighing flour, You practice converting tablespoons to cups. You practice zesting oranges. You practice separating egg yolks, whisking the meringue, and then then you put these individual skills together, and you end up with this wonderful dessert or entree, or I guess this is probably a entree or appetizer when we think about stances. So while this isn't particularly exciting, I'm trying not to do this in a less than fully conscious way. In other words, I'm not just caught up in the rhythm of it and daydream and just count out 1, return, 2, return, and then I'm not present for studying the recipe or the sub skill of the cook. So each time I am paying attention to how I shift the weight, so my knee is bent, how I open the leg. I'm saying turn it from the hip, although it can be done other ways. I'm saying turn from the hip, so the whole leg turns as a unit. And then I place the foot down without weight. And then as I shift, I want to make sure that my knee tracks towards my toe or toes. Remember, my forward position is south, and I'm opening this foot, kind of south-southwest. When I shift, I don't want my femur heading south. I want it heading south-southwest, which is the direction of the support. So that may be the element of your consciousness that's really required in this, that you don't just simply shift forward and not know where your knee is in relation to that supporting foot. Now, this is probably not an awful lot of a stretch, but it might be quite a bit of a challenge for your balance. And certainly we have a narrow footing here, and it's made all the more narrow when we psychologically consider it like standing on a tightrope, and that adds to the imbalance that people experience. But not only am I standing in this narrow stance, but I'm empty here, right? I have all my weight on one foot as I turn this foot, or maybe not all, maybe 98% or something. But I'm practicing as we did when we were doing cat stance previously, in this empty stance. So we have this narrow setup, we have an empty stance, and then we have the pivot, and we have to track. So I would say those are the prime individual elements of this practice. I think I'll just do it in profile as well. Let's see, that looks okay. Oh, I'm going to switch sides. I just did the same side. So. If you wanted to challenge yourself when you come back to all my feet, in this case facing west, you can shift back forward onto it and maybe get a little bit of stretch in the calf of the rear leg, my right leg, so that soleus and gastroc, a little bit of stretch there. So this whole practice, if you were certain of your balance, whether because you have an extrinsic support or you're quite practiced at this sort of thing, you can start this in a longer stance, shift to really get a nice stretch in the Achilles. What we'd feel in a gongbu stance, very similar. And then open, and then as I shift and track, I begin to really stretch the rear. Usually this gets done with it. We haven't finished teaching the stance, but we'd be able to go deeper eventually. And so you might feel like this can be a really nice practice. Stretching, balance. This is one a lot of times I'll practice, or used to practice, holding weights in the arm. We have what we call these stone locks, so these concrete or carved stone padlock. It's hard to describe, I guess, but think kettlebell, I guess. That would probably give you the idea. Good. One idea that I'd like to keep in mind here is that while all my feet are facing west, and my left foot now faces west-southwest or so, I still want to keep my belly button facing west, even though my knee tracks with my foot. So that might feel, you might get a little sensation there in the inguinal crease, or what we might call the qua, in your practice. So I'm gonna do that a couple times here, and then I'll check and see if there's any comments or questions. I gotta remember how far back to go so I can be seen. If there's a stance you'd like to see, please message, let me know. So I don't see comments again. So I was rather delighted at the idea that this might be interactive. I figure it's interactive. It's a little bit more important that it's live. But I think ultimately a few people join in and don't comment, and I just archive it and people watch it on their own and don't need to hear me asking if you have questions. And maybe I have to reconfigure my preferences and expectations. Good. Okay. So we're gonna build on the stance here a little bit. I don't know how many people are still with me. Who knows? Hey Drew, hello. Yeah, health, stability and health of the lower extremities. Yes, sir. Dr. Bowie's talking about the stability and health in the lower half of the body, and that's absolutely true. It's great for flexibility. It's great for circulation. It's great for endurance. It's great for strength. Yeah, it's something you really can't go without stance training, particularly horse stance training. So now we're going to finish developing this Keylin. I'm going to continue to use that straight line. Here I am facing south. So I'm going to shift back, open, shift onto this, and as I shift onto this, I'm going to drop my unweighted knee forward in its original direction, meaning south, the same direction the foot points. And that means that that knee will be heading in the direction of the Achilles or the heel of the other foot. And of course, if that's what you need, use that, no problem. But this is what's called the Keylin Stance. Keylin, and this is a mythical Chinese animal. The Keylin was a long, fabled Chinese animal. You see it represented a number of different ways, but often it's quite dragon-like in characteristic, but with cloven hooves. It's talked about quite a bit in terms of the gentleness of its stepping, the care for creatures, the not even breaking grass or disturbing any of the creatures in the grass. So there's a real kind and caring element to the footwork of the Chilin. There is, you'll see them like described with dragon scales and antlers, like you'd see on a dragon. I think historically one of the things that happened is one of the emperors or whoever, somebody in charge of China or some part of China, I don't remember, sent, I don't know, Somalia or Kenya, something like that, had expeditions in China, as I remember it's Eastern China, which would make sense, I guess. And then they bought or traded, or I don't think they went and caught and rounded up, so there's probably traders there. But they got like zebra and giraffe and things like this. And when the giraffe came back, which is, I mean, absolutely unlike so many animals and anything in China, it was proclaimed to be, or understood to be, or supposed to be this fabled Chilin. So even to this day, the sort of word used for giraffe is very similar to the word used for Chilin, and they're confused or sharing the same word. and that continues into a lot of Southeast Asia. I think Korea, maybe Thailand, I'm sure Japan, where I think they call it a Keylin, like a giraffe is called that. And I think there was stories of them. I'm just talking about it to give you a reason to stay in the stance. You can certainly come out of it or switch sides if that's what you need. When I learned this, I learned it with the rear shin parallel with the ground. In other words, a lot lower, but this is where we are today. But, you know, the Chilin's appearance would kind of foretell the death of an emperor or the coming of a new emperor, something, or maybe both. I think it might have been both. But it was seen as this sort of sign of fate. And I guess I don't know if they're considered really wise or just very good creatures. So I think they sat in court and passed judgment in particular cases. This is why we have a giraffe with us today, because they're often confused for the Chilin. More often, there's another confusion for the Chilin, and that's the unicorn. So very often you'll see people translate this as unicorn. That's not, in fact, all that true. The Chilin often will have more than one horn, and of course, the giraffe itself, it isn't even a horn. These kind of antler-like protrusions on the head. So I've just switched sides here. But we have a unicorn on the farm all the time, so you can. I don't know if I'm petting it there, but hey, buddy. Okay. So generally in the Keylin stance, we'll be facing the direction that rear shin points. That's my original south direction. This leg is tracked. Good. And this might be what we'd see as a transitional stance between a Gongbu stance, like so, or a back stance, and then a Chilin stance. And it's not quite the same as we'd see in a coiled dragon or twisted stance, but it is a bit of a twist in this stance. I'll see what we have for comments while we stay. Don't forget, if this is what you need, that's what you need. No problem at all. It says the Chilin are depicted throughout a wide range of Chinese art, often with parts of their bodies on fire. So you might feel like your legs are on fire or some part of your leg. So it fits the mythology. That's kind of perfect. It says they, you know, their manes always flow upward and they have beards. So I no longer have a mane, but I have a beard. So that's the idea. Sorry, Gerald. Sorry about that, buddy. Well, I guess since we're in the Chilin, that would allow us to lower ourselves to help you back. So that worked out pretty well, didn't it? So I think what I'll do is I'll demonstrate this in profile so you have a better sense of it as well. And as with a lot of stances, you're really going to benefit from being in it, from practicing getting into it, coming out of it evenly, not haltingly, not hurriedly, not without breath. As we were practicing this element, which is just our initial piece to getting into it, paying attention to my stability, paying attention to any lean, paying attention to my loss of awareness of breath, paying attention to the track of the knee, paying attention to the feet remaining flat, and so forth. So I think you can see my feet pretty good there, and I guess I'll just switch for fun. So open here, and there's my unicorn stance. You'll often see the unicorn stance like so, right? So we just, I don't know how well you can see that, but this kind of a stance. But we are Just letting that heel come up on the rear leg, which I don't feel like I talked about too much. Sometimes once that rear foot really just has that one point of contact, the ball of the foot, the heel will waver, maybe a bit like a metronome, and it'll fall outward or inward, probably outward on this. And I want to feel that my foot is always facing where it started, in my case west. So even though the heel rises, it hasn't rotated or pivoted. If I extend it, it's exactly where it started. Maybe showing this from the rear while the wind picks up. That's not good. I've turned my foot now. This is not good. I've turned my foot. So when that foot comes up, it stays in the alignment here. My guess is you can't hear me that way when I turn around, so I'm gonna not do it. So here's our Chilin. Very often you'll hear people, Westerners just call it unicorn stance, and this is what they mean, and of course probably their version of it. Everybody's version is the one true version. I'm just showing you a way to do it. And we'll come back, step, open, settle, track, lower. So as I lower, same principles we considered. Am I leaning? Am I tracking? Am I stable on the foot? Has my weight shifted to the outside edge, too far forward, or not? As usual, we'd want you to practice only if you know yourself healthy enough to do this and on a stable level surface, preferably somewhere a little bit warmer. So my guess is that I have to get onto my other class soon, and I'll see if there are other questions, and of course there are not. So thank you and goodbye.